Hello, everyone. If you have ever tried to create a budget but couldn't make it work for you, then the next hour is going to be well worth your time. It's one thing to put numbers on a piece of paper and call it a budget, but as I call it, the witchcraft and the magic is in putting together a realistic plan and then learning how to actually put that plan into play. And that's what I'm going to teach you right now. I want to thank you for joining today's webinar on how to create a spending plan. My name is Melissa Tossetti, and I'm the founder of The Savvy Life. For the past 10 years, I've been teaching savvy living through webinars such as this one, as well as in-person classes all over the U.S. When I'm not teaching, I spend most of my days working one-on-one with individuals and families doing exactly what I'm going to show you right now. I work with them to create their own personalized spending plans. But more importantly, I teach them how to actually put that plan into play, and I'm going to show you that today as well. First, one quick housekeeping matter. Your phone should have been muted as you logged in, and that is to keep the background noise to a minimum. I'm going to finish with 5-10 minutes to spare to answer questions. So if you do have questions, what I ask is that you please type them into the questions section on your screen and do that while I'm giving the presentation, and that will allow me to get right to those questions in the last few minutes. All right? So with that, let's get started. One of the questions I often get asked is, what is the difference between a spending plan and a budget? Technically, they're the same thing. They both tell your money where to go instead of you wondering where your money went. Now, the reason that I prefer to use the term spending plan is that for most people, the word budget has a very negative connotation. It feels like restriction. It frankly feels like punishment. Whereas the term spending plan brings to mind the idea of creating a plan for where you want to spend your money. And that's exactly what it is. It's a plan for where you want to spend your money. And since my goal is to teach day-to-day money from a positive perspective, that's why I choose to use the term spending plan. So for our agenda today, and let me just get to that slide real quick. There we go. I'm going to explain to you what it means to live a savvy life, what that entails. I'm then going to talk about the importance of defining your motivation for creating your spending plan. And then as promised by the title of the webinar, I'm going to walk you through the steps for how you can create your own spending plan. Now, yesterday you should have received a spending plan template from me. If you did not receive that, please let me know. You can send me an email on the last slide. My email address is going to be on there. Just send me an email and I'll make sure to get a copy of that to you. But everybody should have received that. Now, my intention is that you can, go through this webinar today. I'll show you the components of that webinar, of that spending plan, and then you can then take and run with your own template, personalize it, and make your own spending plan. That's the intention. All right, from there, I'm going to talk out ideas to help you to reduce your expenses and some of the most common areas clients I've worked with have wanted to focus on, all right? And then I'm going to talk about how to put that spending plan into action. And again, this is the real work. I shouldn't even say work. This is the real challenge for some people. And that's, again, this is what we do with clients every single day. This is what I'm going to help you with that particular area, putting that plan into play. And then from there, I will explain the snowball debt repayment system for how to pay off your debt as efficiently as possible. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how do you make this a part of your lifestyle. So as you can see, there is a lot that we're going to go over in the next 55 minutes or so. I want to tell you three things. First, I'm recording the webinar so you can receive a copy of it. So if you get a little lost, don't worry, you're going to have an opportunity to replay it. Second, as I mentioned, I'm going to be answering questions at the end. So go ahead and type your questions in as you go along because you may end up with more than one question. And then finally, as I mentioned, my email address will be on the last page. So if you have a more detailed question, or you have a question that you prefer not to ask in a more public environment, then please feel free to send me an email, and I'll get back to you within the next 24 hours. Since this is a morning session, it's likely I'll be able to get back to you today. All right? Okay, so let's get started. First of all, what is living a savvy life? Well, if you joined the last session on the 9 savvy money habits, then this may be familiar to you. If not, living a savvy life simply is the process of building a strong financial foundation while enjoying the journey, and doing that just by being very purposeful with where you spend your time and where you spend your money. It's about successfully setting money aside for your financial future while still being able to do the things you want to do now, such as travel, purposefully dining out. You get the idea. Now, living a savvy life starts with the savvy life philosophy, which is simply to save money on the things that are not important to you so you can focus your spending on the things that are important to you. It's about consciously picking and choosing, right? This day and age that we live in, everything moves so fast. We are making so many different money decisions, but to a great extent, we're making those decisions out of habit versus really consciously thinking through them. So it's about becoming much more aware of those spending decisions and deciding, this is where I really want to spend a little bit more money. This is where I'm getting a lot of enjoyment. Or, hey, this is where I could maybe streamline a bit so then I can focus that savings on other things. Now, the example that I always give of the Savvy Life philosophy in action is how my husband Paul and I use it. The one thing we are extraordinarily passionate about, like a lot of the folks that we work with, is travel. Now, an area that we're not passionate about by any sense of the word is cars. For us, cars are simply tools for us to get from one point to another. And because cars are simply tools for us, we choose to purchase, when it's time to replace one of our cars, we seek out just a nice, reliable used car, something that we would enjoy driving, right? But a used car, and the portion of the money that we save by not having two separate, $400, $500 a month car payments, that allows us to spend on what is important to us, and that is travel. And this philosophy has taken us on travels all over the world. Identifying what is important to you lets you know when to spend, and it also lets you know when to save. And what that does is it amplifies the power of every dollar. So as you create your spending plan, one of the things that is very, very important to keep in mind is the golden rule of personal finance, and that is to spend less than you make. All right? If you get nothing out of today's session, but you take and run with this one slide, this one rule, spend less than you make, today's time, this hour is well spent for you. It is mathematically impossible to be financially successful if more money is going out the door than what is coming in. And in this day and age when there are so many different forms of currency that we can use to buy what we want and what we need to buy throughout any given day, week, or month, it can be very challenging to know if you are spending within what you make. Now, the plus side, creating a plan for where you need and want to spend your money over the course of the next 12 months will help greatly to ensure that you are living within the golden rule and spending less than you make. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of actually creating your spending plan, one of the things that needs to be thought through is, what is your motivation for wanting to go through this process? One of the things that I have learned from my own experience and from working with so many clients over the years, clients of all demographics, attorneys, CEOs, doctors, you name it, I've learned that saving money just for the sake of saving that money is not motivating. And I will say, especially when it comes to long-term goals, such as retirement, right? Well, while desirous, for most of us, it feels so far away, so our motivation isn't as strong, right, as if we were going to retire in 6 months and we could taste it. Another one that I find that is, very important, but is not necessarily exciting to save for, is if you have kids, their college savings, right? I've got a lot of clients, they've got, very young children. They know that if they start now that they'll be so much better off when their children turn 18, get ready to go off to college. But there's so many other things, competing for their attention that it can be very challenging for them to, pull the trigger and save that money. Now, on the flip side, short-term goals such as, a dream car, travel, spending on a hobby. Now, those are much more fun, first of all, and then because they have a shorter time frame, those goals tend to be much more feel much more attainable. So one of the ways that we've been able to, or not one of the way, we've been able to help clients to start setting money aside for those long-term goals is we have those long-term goals as a part of their spending plan, but we also really clearly define what their short-term goals are. Those short-term goals are also a part of the spending plan. Now, they're focusing on and they're thinking about those short-term goals, right? That's their carrot. They're going to be able to go on that cruise in 6 months or take that trip to Europe in, next year, as long as they're setting aside a certain amount, putting that plan into play. Well, guess what? Those long-term goals are a part of the plan. So as a byproduct of travel or whatever that short-term goal is, they are successfully putting money aside for their long-term goals. And that's one of my favorite parts of this entire process is that your present self is taking care of your future self by really, doing the things that you want to do, striving for those, short-term things that you really want to do. It's like the best part. All right. So what I would like to do now is actually pull up the spending plan template. All right. And so this is very similar to the one that you received yesterday. Let me just pop over here. All right. And what I'd like to do is first I want to give you a lay of the land. This template has evolved over the last 10 years of working with clients to make it as beneficial as possible, right? As easy to understand, as easy to play with, but also just to help for the best possible outcome of being able to achieve goals. All right, it sounds a little dramatic for an Excel spreadsheet, but that's what's happened over the last 10 years. So this first part, as you can see, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. All right, this first part up here, this is where you're going to be putting any income, and I'm going to pop back up here in a moment and go into a little bit more detail. This table right here focuses specifically on your monthly essential expenses, right? So those are the expenses that are critical, that need to be paid on a monthly basis, a routine basis, to keep a roof over your head, food on the table, to get you to be able to afford the transportation that's going to get you to your paycheck or whatever that, whatever that might be. All right. So that's what this section is. This section next to it, these are also essential expenses, but they come up intermittently. All right, we have those separate, and we do that for a very, very important reason. When you have just one long list of your expenses and your intermittent expenses are tangled with your monthly expenses, you're having to kind of think through like what's coming up now or what's routine, or your intermittent expenses get lost and all of a sudden you get popped with a property tax bill that if you had saved up for it for 6 months, that it wouldn't have been no problem. But now you're having to scramble and it's throwing off your monthly expenses. All right. So it's very important to know and understand and identify what those intermittent critical expenses are. And again, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into these in just a moment when I'm done with your tour of the spending plan. So now down here, you have your monthly expenses that are your lifestyle expenses, the fun stuff, right? The things that you want to do or that make your life unique to you. Okay, so again, these are fairly routine. For most people, they don't get too thrown off by them. Now, however, the intermittent lifestyle expenses, again, these can be bigger expense items. Again, they're coming up intermittently, and they can have a tendency to throw us off. So we're going to talk about these in a little bit more detail and how to manage them, okay, so you don't get thrown off. And then finally, down here, you have your analysis. So as you start plugging numbers in here, right, then what's going to happen is the analysis is going to populate itself, all right? And down here In this last line, it's going to give you an idea if you have a surplus or a deficit. If you have a surplus, fantastic. If you have a deficit, then it's time to do a little bit more work and start looking for areas where you can reduce expenses, streamline spending. All right, so let's start with income. So we're going to pop up here. I forgot one more very, very important part of the mapping here. These first two columns, all right, these first two columns in these sections, this is where you're going to put the information of where you stand right now. Whether it's fantastic or it's a little bit ugly, you need to know, right? It's just data. Just think about it from that perspective. The last thing I want is you beating yourself up about the situation that you're in right now, okay? So this is where you're going to put what all your income is now, what all your expenses are now. And then what you can do is once you have all that information, you copy and paste this information to these columns here, your new monthly and your new annual. And this is where you get to start playing with the numbers. So for example, I have groceries highlighted here specifically. Let's say you're a family of 4 and you're spending $1,500 a month on groceries, all right? Some families do that. Some families, that's a lot of money. This is an area where they could streamline. And let's say that I tell you that with most clients that really don't have a plan around groceries, with one conversation, 15, 20-minute conversation, I can help them easily reduce their spending on groceries by at least 20, 30%. Well, if that's the case, let's say I can reduce their groceries down to $1,200 a month or help them with that. All right, so this is where that goal spending is. That's where you're going to put it. And what's the beauty of this is that as you're playing with these numbers in these new columns, you can come down here to the analysis and you can see, okay, yeah, my deficit just went down. I'm going in the right direction. Okay. In a perfect world, you're going to want a surplus here, and then we'll talk about what to do with that surplus in a few minutes. Okay. So starting with income. And what you want to do with your income is you only want to put in here the amount of money that actually gets deposited into your checking account, okay? You don't want your gross income because a lot of that's going to maybe you pay. That's just not money that you have available to pay your bills or to spend from, okay? So let's just say, keep this easy, your salary, your take-home salary is $5,000 a month, okay? Let's just say you get a bonus of $5,000 every year. That's not what your actual, the full amount of your bonus, but what actually typically of that bigger bonus, $5,000 actually gets deposited into your checking account. So one of the things about bonuses is you only want to put those bonuses in the annual column. You do not want to divide this number by 12 because it's going to give you a false sense of how much money you have available to you every single month, okay? So you just know that you're going to get this lump amount of $5,000. If you regularly receive a tax refund and it's significant, you want to add that in here. This is exactly where you're going to put it. And again, you only want to put it in the annual column, all right? Some clients I work with, they'll regularly receive gift money from family members, just random money or miscellaneous money. Again, anything that is not coming on a routine basis, you want to put here, all right? Now, I'm talking about salary. If you're retired, right, then you're going to put your retirement distributions here or Social Security. The beauty of this spending plan template is you can just write over, all right? Make it your own, all right? And then you could also always, for those of you that know Excel, you could always add rows and add columns as you go along, okay? Or excuse me, you don't want to add columns, but you can always add rows. All right, so now you know that on a monthly basis, you have $5,000 to pay your bills with, do your spending out of. But on an annual basis, you have $67,000. So you've got $7,000 in this lump sum money that's going to come to you that you can decide what to do with, all right? All right, so now we're going to come down here and let's look at your monthly essential expenses. Now, if you recall, I talked about how our short-term goals help us to achieve our long-term goals. So the first thing that I want you to do on your spending plan is, once you've decided what that long-term goal is and how much money you need to set aside every single month, whether this is a figure that you created or your financial advisor has told you, this is how much you need to be saving every month to achieve that goal, you're going to put that number right here, okay? This is the first thing. That long-term goal is the most critical. All right. And then you just start filling out the worksheet from there. You know, a lot of this is very self-explanatory. You have your mortgage. One thing I will mention about this category here, some clients have their mortgage, their insurance, and their property tax all escrowed together. Then I would go ahead and just add that information here. So this is going to be insurance and property tax. Okay. What you want to do to the best of your ability is to make sure that the spending plan, the categories on here, match what your real life looks like. The last thing you want to do is have to look at your spending plan really quickly and have to interpret the information, okay? For example, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, our utility company is Pacific Gas and Electric, or we call it PG&E. So on my spending plan, instead of electricity, I actually I have PG&E, so I don't even have to take any brain power to figure that out, right? And then the other thing that you're going to do as you go along is you're going to delete the categories that are just not meaningful to you. Again, you've got to make this your own. So in our household, PG&E also includes gas. So what I can do is I can just actually delete this category. All right? Talked about groceries. The reason I have groceries here and household items here is that for a lot of clients, this is one of the first areas where they might be overspending. Again, going into the grocery store without a plan, just kind of randomly picking stuff up versus being very purposeful and streamlining. So these tend to be areas where clients can look at comparing. You know, a lot of clients, they might be spending $300 a month at Target on paper towels, cleaning products, etc. But all of a sudden they look under their cupboards and they realize, wow, it's like 3 bottles of cleaning products that haven't even been touched yet. I'm just kind of grabbing those things versus really thinking through whether I need them. And so they can easily reduce and streamline their spending there. This category too, for a lot of clients, this is to keep their tracking simple or to keep the process simple. They might combine groceries and household items and have just one category instead of 2. In my household, I combine groceries, household items, and also pet food. So we have a dog, a cat, and 2 hamsters. I just consider their food to be groceries. So I'm not having to track separate. I have a very clear idea of how much that I'm spending in those particular areas. There's no room to reduce that spending in any given area. They're very routine, so it's not important for me to track that separately, if that makes sense. All right. Down here, you've got your transportation information. If you don't have a car, if you take mass transit, this is where you would put your mass transit pass in. Some clients, they have not just parking, but they have tolls that they might add. Some clients, they don't pay their car insurance monthly. They pay it intermittently. So you can see actually over here in the intermittent area, there is not a place. There should have been a place for you to be able to put your car insurance here instead. You can just, again, create your own category. All right. Health insurance, the reason that I have health insurance highlighted here is just to remind you, if your health insurance is taken out of your paycheck, if you're not actually having to spend money out of your checking account to pay your health insurance, then go ahead and delete this category, because otherwise you're double counting it. Same with insurance, disability insurance, etc. Okay. We have co-pays and prescriptions here under the monthly area. A lot of folks, they have these expenses are fairly routine. If you're pretty healthy and you rarely get prescriptions or go to the doctor for co-pays, you might want to put these expenses in the intermittent area, okay? And then communication. If you don't have a landline for your telephone, you can go ahead and delete that category, put your cell phone in there. Internet, a lot of folks have their internet and their cable TV combined. That's a combined bill. Go ahead and add it here. And the reason is because most households nowadays, their internet connection is an essential expense. If that's combined, just bring that cable bill up here as well, even though that's not necessarily as essential. It's tied to your internet. Okay? So the beauty of separating this out is that you now know, wow, in order to pay for my critical expenses, that it's going to cost me $3,300 of my $5,000 a month paycheck. So that's just an awareness that is very, very important. Okay. We're going to pop over here now to your intermittent essential expenses. If property tax is not escrowed, obviously you want to put it in here. I have home repair highlighted here. And the reason that I have that is because I want to explain something. We have home repair here. Down here under lifestyle expenses, we have home improvement. There's a difference between the two. Home repair is about fixing the broken. If my roof doesn't get fixed before winter comes, I'm going to have a much, much more expensive home repair bill, right? I need to make sure that that gets taken care of. That is an essential expense. Home improvement expenses tend to be aesthetic. I want to paint the house. I want to buy a new couch. I want to buy drapes. They're not essential. They're nice. You'd like to do it, so they come under the lifestyle expenses section. Okay? All right. And then the rest of this information is self-explanatory. The one thing that I would say, let's just say you're going to spend $500 this year on home repair. Now, I'll fill out a couple more of these. Say you're going to spend, $200 on auto maintenance. You don't anticipate any repairs this year. Car's in really, really good health, but you do want to have your regular maintenance. And then let's say it costs you $100 for your car registration. So this number right here is very critical in that if you get thrown off by your intermittent expenses on a regular basis, this number tells you how much money you need to save on a monthly basis in order to take care and manage these intermittent expenses. In other words, this gives you the opportunity to treat your intermittent expenses like monthly bills. That is the key to getting off the roller coaster of getting thrown off by these expenses. Treat them like monthly bills. Now, again, you know exactly how much money you need. You can create a savings account just for your intermittent essential expenses. Put $66.67 in there a month. And when that home repair expense comes up, the money's there. You can just transfer it over to your checking, write that check, and your house gets repaired. All right? Okay. So now let's drop down to the fun stuff. So down here we've got dining out to start. One of the reasons I have this highlighted is I just want to let you know that for a lot of folks, this is another area where they really, when they're going out, they're not even enjoying it because they're going out all the time and they're just fatigued by it. It's because they don't have a plan around getting groceries into the house on a regular basis. This is a lot of the conversations we have with clients about helping in that, fix that, repair that. The reason we have this separated out is because for a lot of clients, they might be spending $200 a month on lunches at work, $400 a month on dinners out, and maybe $100 a week, $100 a month on coffee. And they might realize, you know what, I'd rather continue to spend $100 a week on dinners out with my family because I really enjoy that time. But, going out to lunch on a regular basis, I'm waiting in line, I'm having to leave my office, I can take my lunch to work, and by the time I would normally have got in my car, waited in line, ordered, got food, I would already be done eating my lunch, and I could go and relax and read a book somewhere instead. So it's about saving time as well as money. So this is an area where they might decide, wow, instead I'm going to only go to lunch maybe once a week. And if I do that, maybe it's going to be $40, and I'm going to save a significant amount of money simply by doing that. That's why we have it broken out. If you would rather have it just one dining out category, that's fine too. Okay, got to make it your own. The reason I have this one highlighted, movies, museums, and entertainment. for a lot of clients, this can be challenging because it does tend to be intermittent. We're not necessarily going to the movies every single week and it's a routine expense. If you can think through what an average month might look like, that's the number you're going to put here, okay? This also, by the way, is separate from, hey, we're going to go to a concert, 3 concerts this year or a couple of plays this year. Those you would put, because they're a bigger expense and they're coming up more randomly, you put in your intermittent expenses over here, okay? I have pocket money highlighted because this can get very confusing. If you pull out, let's say $100 a month, and you use that for just miscellaneous things throughout the month, then you definitely want to include it. But if you use that pocket money as currency to pay for your lunches out, then you're double counting it. So that's, just think about that. Are you using that money as currency? Obviously it's currency, right? But are you using it as currency to pay for something that is already on your plan? Then you're double counting. Or if you're using it for just miscellaneous money for little things throughout that you are not a part of the plan, then you want to include it, okay? All right, any credit card payments you can put here. Again, add and name it. You don't want this to say credit card debt. You want it to say Amex or Visa or whatever it might be, and you want to add all your payments here. So if you have more than one, go ahead and list it, okay? And then the last area here, your intermittent lifestyle expenses. Remember, we talked about the power of that short-term goal being the catalyst for making this whole thing work, giving you that motivation. Once you figure out how much money you need to save on a regular basis for that short-term goal, you're going to want to put it here, okay? And then that's the key, again, to making everything else work. We already talked about home improvements. I have holiday and holiday gifts. I just want to let you know we do have that separate from gifts throughout the year. It's just easier for clients to think through that way, okay? And then the other thing, again, most of this is very self-explanatory. I'm just hitting the areas where we tend to talk through a little bit more or shift a little bit for clients, or they get a little bit tricky. And this one right here, annual computer subscriptions. This is, for a lot of us, this is a fairly new category in the last 5-10 years. This is going to be your Spotify subscription. Costco's not computer, but you can think of your Costco subscription, membership. This could be Audible, right? So all those things, Amazon Prime, that's another big one. You want to make sure that even though those expenses may be hitting a credit card, you're still having to pay for them. You need to make sure that they're a part of your plan, okay? And then again, you get down to your analysis. If there is a surplus, fantastic, all right? Let's just focus on these numbers here. Now, I'm looking at this and thinking, wow, I have $683 a month surplus, or actually with that bonus money and that tax refund money, there's $15,000 a year that's a surplus. The last thing you want is to have that money floating around in your checking account because it will have a tendency to disappear into the ether. You want to actually make a plan for that money. It could go to your emergency fund. Some of it could go toward paying down your debt faster. You could take a bigger vacation, all right? Again, in an ideal world, every dollar has a purpose, and this allows you to know, wow, how much do I have available in order to make that happen? So just start setting that money aside, figuring out what you're going to do with it, and get to a point where there is either a smaller balance down here, a smaller surplus, or a zero break-even point, okay? All right. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So we talked about creating your spending plan, all right? Now I just want to talk very quickly about some of the areas where most clients focus on reducing their expenses. First of all, you have a leak. A financial leak is something that is a routine bill, right? Your cell phone bill, your cable bill, your unused gym memberships. You are spending more money than you want to. You're not getting value out of those particular expenses. So those are leaks, okay? So if you haven't been going to the gym, either use this as motivation to get in there, use that membership, or cancel it, okay? If If you're not using all of your data every month and you're overspending here, pick up the phone and call. A little money here and a little money there adds up to a lot of money and can end up becoming your next vacation, right? It's not about just saving money, again, for the sake of saving. It's where are you going to save, and then where are you going to apply that savings? And then overspending is when we're making choices, okay? So again, typical overspending where clients are really trying to think through and make better decisions, become more purposeful, is groceries, dining out, clothes, and then the black hole that is Target, Costco, and Amazon Prime. Those are the three diabolical marketing geniuses that are really, really good at influencing us to spend money when we might not necessarily have meant to. I talked ad nauseum about those particular situations and how to become purposeful in those situations in the Savvy Money Habits session a couple of weeks ago, so I won't go into great detail. I will say, though, with the groceries and the dining out and the clothes, these particular areas are areas that are a focus for upcoming webinars in this webinar series, all right? Clothes specifically we'll be talking about on March 26th, that particular webinar. That is not about not spending money on clothes. That is just about becoming purposeful, building a wardrobe only of clothes that you love. This is for men and women, okay? And then we're going to talk on April 23rd about all things food. Again, how do you become purposeful? How do you stop looking at grocery shopping as a chore and are able to easily get those groceries into the house on a regular basis? And then when you go out to eat, it's something that you're really looking forward to rather than there's no food in the house and I've just got to stop by on my way from work even though I'm exhausted to get takeout. Okay? All right. So I'm not going into great detail on how to avoid these or how to spend more purposefully in these because I'm going to go into tremendous detail in upcoming webinars. All right. Now, how do you put your spending plan into action? Again, I joke around that this is the witchcraft and the magic. It's one thing, you could very easily plug in all those numbers, have your plan, and then have that document live in your on your hard drive forever and never look at it again. That's not what you want to do. This is your compass for where you want your money to go over the next 12 months or so. So the first thing is to track your spending. Okay. Tracking spending just means that on a regular basis, you're going to look at what you're spending on. Some clients use a website called You Need a Budget. Some clients use Quicken. Some clients use an Excel spreadsheet to track their spending. Some use a notebook. What I will tell you is that it is very, very, very important to keep that tracking process as simple as possible. The more complicated you make it, the more you're going to resist doing it. I talked about this in the last session about, we went into detail about how this process of how to track your spending. You can go back. I'd be happy to send you a recording of that particular session, Savvy Money Habits, if this is something that you need a refresher on. But I do want to remind you, one of the things that I found that's critical for tracking spending is to do it first thing in the morning. For those of you that do find yourself being super resistant, do it first thing in the morning. Track your spending for the previous day. Or if you can only do it once a week on Saturday morning, do it first thing before other things start to compete for your attention, and then it becomes just very, very easy to procrastinate. One of the other things that is very important regarding your spending plan and putting that plan into play is that you are matching the categories that are on your spending plan to what you're tracking, okay? So in other words, if, like I mentioned, simple example is I told you that I don't track electricity, I track PG&E when I'm paying my utility bill. Or a lot of clients, instead of having a drugstore category on their spending plan, they'll specifically call out a store like CVS. That's the drugstore. They want to make sure, again, it says CVS on my spending plan, so my tracking category is going to be CVS. It's got to be apples to apples. Because if it's apples to bananas, again, you're going to have spend just that extra second or two to think through and to interpret that information. You want to be able to just look at it and know exactly what is what, okay? Talked about saving for intermittent expenses on a monthly basis and how critical that is. One of the things you may want to consider is to create multiple savings accounts for those intermittent expenses, all right? There are some people that the idea of having multiple savings accounts kind of puts them in a panic, and that's fine. For those clients, a lot of them will use an Excel spreadsheet to track to manage those savings. They have one savings account for all those expenses, but they'll use an Excel worksheet to track of that total how much is going to go to travel, how much is for an emergency fund, et cetera. However, a lot of clients, and this is actually something that I do, I have 9 different savings accounts for my intermittent expenses because even though I do this for a living, it is hilarious that I have the hardest time keeping things from not getting tangled. And so I have a savings account, for example, for vacations, for all the animals that we have in our household, for veterinarian visits, pet boarding, et cetera. I have one for our cars for maintenance and repairs. You get the idea. So some of the categories are kind of lumped together. But I will say that no matter what, I do believe very strongly that it is worth having a separate savings account for your emergency fund. That has to be its own. It cannot get tangled with anything else. And a separate savings account for travel, if that is one of the most people I know, that really is the big area that they want to be, that's their short-term goal, okay, is that travel. Keep those separate. They have 2 very, very different goals. Your emergency fund, in the ideal world, you're not going to need to use that. Where the travel, you're actually going to use that money. So if it's tangled with your emergency fund, it's too easy to feel uncomfortable pulling that money out. And on the flip side, if there's an emergency, it's too easy to pull into your travel, right? Or to just not know how much do I have for what. So really consider keeping those separate, okay? And then the last thing, and this is key, is that with your tracking, that you're not just tracking it and forgetting it, not looking at it again, but you're actually reviewing on a weekly basis. All right, how did we do in our spending last week? Are we on track? Is there a surplus? Can we, we didn't go out to eat at all last week. Does that mean we can spend double if we want to on dining out next week? Really go to that one restaurant we've really been wanting to go to, right? Or, oh, wow, it was so-and-so's birthday last week and we spent more than we intended on dining out. Let's go ahead and just, dial it down this week. This is how you manage your spending. There's one thing that I want to be very, very, very clear about. In most households, there's one person that is actually doing the tracking, and that makes sense, right? It's for 2 people to do it can get kind of confusing. But that one person, it's too easy in a family or for a couple for that one person to become the money police. I feel very strongly about this. That is not fair, all right? When it comes to doing the reviewing, even though one person may be doing the tracking, both partners need to be sitting down and reviewing that information together so they're both on the same page versus the person who's doing the tracking saying, oh, no, we can't afford to do that, and then there's negative feelings both ways, all right? Sit down together. You're both on the same page. Both have the same goals, okay? This is one, if you have specific questions about this one, please let me know because it's this little process has done more to relax couples around the managing of money than any other process that we've talked about, with the exception of actually creating the plan in the first place. All right, now I want to talk about the snowball debt repayment strategy. Financial experts across the world do believe that this is the most efficient way to pay down debt. And I'm going to kind of verbalize it, and then I want to show you, I'm going to bring that template back up again. So the idea with the snowball debt repayment strategy is that you are going to pay as much as you can to one particular debt. The other debt that you have, you're going to pay the minimum amount owed, right? But if you have extra money, you're going to pick one of those debts and you're going to put that extra money on top of the minimum amount for that particular account. Now, for some people, they want to focus on the highest interest rate first. That's actually called the avalanche system, debt repayment system. For others, they want to focus on paying off that lowest balance first. That's the snowball debt repayment system. In my experience, I'm a bigger fan of paying the lowest balance first because of human nature. A lot of times that highest interest rate, it can be, you can owe more to that than to your other cards, and it can take longer to pay that off. Even though you're being efficient about it, it can take longer to pay that off, and it can be a little disheartening. By focusing on the card with the lowest balance first, you pay that off quickly, and then you then are able to focus on that next card. There's a boost there, an emotional boost there that can be very, very powerful. So what happens is, as you pay off that first card, the total amount that you were paying on that first card, you're going to snowball, you're going to put it on top of the minimum amount that you were paying on the next card you want to pay off, right? It's like snowballs. As you roll them in snow, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. That amount that you're paying towards the one card gets bigger and bigger and bigger along the way. And I'll give you an example. Let me go back over here. Okay. I've created, so on your tab or the template that you have too, you've got this debt tab that you can list all the debt you have. Here, you're going to put what the minimum payment is for each card, the total amount owed, and the interest rate. So, for example, if this is my debt and I just went along and paid the minimum amount on everything, I would have all the debt paid off by June 2020, and I would pay $380 in interest. But let's say that I've done my spending plan and I have a surplus amount of money. I found an extra $50 that I can put toward paying my debt every single month, okay? So now instead of paying $50 toward that Amex, I want to focus on this one first because it has the lowest balance. I only owe $600 on it. So if I pay $50, instead of paying $50 a month, I can pay $100, okay? I'm going to add the 50 extra that I have towards that 50 minimum, and in a little over 6 months, this debt's going to be paid off. So when that is paid off, what I'm going to do, so that's gone, is the $100 that I was paying here, I'm actually now going to roll it on top of this $100, and so now I'm going to be paying $200 here, okay? So now I've just doubled the amount of money that I'm paying towards this MasterCard, so I'm going to pay it that much faster. And then when that's paid off, this $200, I'm going to roll it on top, and I'm going to be paying $350 a month on this Visa. You can see how powerful this becomes. So now if I do this process simply by adding another $50 a month toward paying down the debt, and by paying $50, finding that extra $50, and by using the system of focusing just on one debt at a time, I'm now going to pay this debt off 6 months faster, 5-6 months faster. I'll pay it off in January of 2020 instead of June, so a year from now versus a year and 6 months from now, and I'm only going to pay $319 in interest. It's a pretty powerful system. Now, a couple of things. The first one is that once you get this set up, you're going to babysit it, but you're not going to emotionally live in it. Understandably, there are a lot of folks that have a lot of debt. There's a lot of negative emotion around it, and the unfortunate thing about that, though, is that that negative emotion can really keep you here. One of the reasons is that so many clients that I work with, this is the number one area. This is their short-term goal, okay? This is where they really, really want to focus any extra money they have. But the problem is that they're focusing all their extra money on it. They're not putting any money toward any type of emergency fund. They're using their credit cards as an emergency fund. So if, let's say if that's your situation, and the dishwasher breaks, and you have to replace it, you're going to have no other choice but to use your credit card to pay for that dishwasher. And now you just increase your debt again, and it becomes circular, and it becomes very, very, very frustrating. And then you're thinking, oh, I'm bad with money. It's, again, I've seen it all, and I've heard it all, and it breaks my heart. So instead, I very, very strongly suggest that you have a certain amount of that extra money going toward your credit card debt, but a certain amount going to an emergency fund. Some clients, depending on their situation, they might split any extra money 50-50, 50 to the emergency fund, 50 to the debt repayment. All right, just be mindful and be self-aware around that. Okay, and again, just don't live in this. Set it up, manage it, babysit it, but then your whole goal is to live within your spending plan and to spend within the plan, and that debt is going to take care of itself along the way. All right? All right, I'm going to just pop back here. All right, and then the last thing I just want to leave you with is the importance of making this a part of your lifestyle. I say all the time that we look at personal finance from a lifestyle perspective. So it's not just about those, critical money habits. It's about spending smart in all the different areas of your life where you want to enjoy life, right? So in thinking about this from a lifestyle perspective, also knowing that these habits need to be a part of your lifestyle. So one of the things, if it is at all possible, to fall in love with the process of tracking your spending. I will tell you in all transparency that one of the most difficult things that I do is trying to convince clients to get into the habit of tracking their spending. But if I can convince them to do it for 30 days, more often than not, they get addicted to it. They really do fall in love with it. And the reason is because it gives them control over their money like they've never had. Not only do they know where their money is going, but with that knowledge, they can make adjustments to it. They can choose to spend differently versus all of a sudden opening up their bank account and realizing that there's no money, and then they're just going to have to scramble until the next pay period versus, tracking their spending. They realize, ooh, getting a little close to the edge. Let's go ahead and, cut back. Or on the flip side, which happens just as often, if not more often, realizing that, wow, I'm tracking my spending, I'm on track. Part of my spending plan is to go out and to eat, spend $100 a week on dining out or $200 or whatever it might be. Let's go. And then they're enjoying spending that money so much more. They're relaxed around it because it is a part of their spending plan versus in the past they may have had guilt around that, a negative emotion every time that they do go out. So again, they know exactly how much they have to spend for the fun stuff, so there's no more guilt around that spending. All right? Another way to make this a part of your lifestyle is to have an accountability buddy. This is something that is, near and dear to my heart. My husband is my accountability buddy for our particular family expenses. But I know how powerful this is because I have a workout accountability buddy. Those days that I really just want to not go and work out, I know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Coach Geraldine is going to be there, and we're going to be working out together. So I need to suck it up and do it, and then I'm always happy when I do. Maybe not always happy, but a little tired, but I know it's always worth it. So whether it's a spouse, a family member, a really good friend, let them know that you're trying to make these changes and that you would like to just, if they don't hear from you that you've done a certain task or that they can just ask you about certain things here and there, that you've provided them that information to keep you accountable, then it will just, your probability for success is just so much higher. And then the last bullet, and this is very, very important, is to reward yourself. And what I mean by that is that the fun stuff is a part of your plan. Those lifestyle spending, those lifestyle expenses that we have as part of your plan, they are a part of your plan. Make sure that you're actually going out and spending in those particular areas. Reward yourself for doing right by your money, having this plan and putting that plan into play. All right? Now, before I get to or go to see if there are any questions, I just want to let you know that the next webinar in this series is going to be on February 26th, and the topic is Savvy Travel. My business partner, Kevin, and I, this is by far our favorite webinar in the series. The focus is how do you find more money to travel, and then where do you get those great travel deals? All right, again, that is February 26th. So when you get that invitation, feel free to pass it on to friends and family members. You should be getting that invitation from your financial advisor sometime in the next week or two. So again, pass that on, spread the spread the word. All right. And with that, I'm just going to see if there are any questions. Let me see here. Okay, so one question is, I get paid every other week and have 2 paychecks in a year. How do I manage that on my spending plan? That is an excellent question. The way that we do that on our spending plans, and actually let me just hang on a second. Let me click off here. We actually create, instead of dividing that number and then, figuring out what that number, what those extra paychecks look like over the course of the year and inflating your monthly number, instead what we do is we consider it like an annual, like a intermittent income, right? So if you get 2 extra paychecks in a year, you're getting basically the equivalent of an extra month's pay. So that, again, we're not adding that money as a monthly income because it doesn't come that way to you. We're adding it right here, okay? So now you have an idea as that money is coming in, then you can decide what you want to do with it. Okay, great question. Let's see. One more question here. I'm in real estate and don't have regular income. How do I make this work? I love working with real estate agents. I love working with salespeople because they have huge opportunities to really be able to capture their surplus income and put that money to work for them. The way that we have our real estate agents and folks in sales that get all of their money from commission is we actually, instead of having them put their income into a checking account, all their income goes into 2 different savings accounts. The first savings account is set aside for taxes. Absolutely imperative. There's no wiggle room around this whatsoever. That money has to be set aside because that is one of the areas where real estate agents can get themselves into a lot of trouble, is not setting that money aside. So that goes into a separate savings account for taxes. The rest of that money lump money goes into their savings account, and then what they do is they actually give themselves a paycheck. They pay themselves a certain amount every single month in order to manage all of their expenses. And then what will happen, depending on how long they've been in real estate, how what the market looks like, a lot of different parameters, but every either 4 months, 6 months, or once a year, depending on how much of a surplus they have in that savings, they will give themselves a bonus, okay? So they know, wow, I've got plenty of money in here to get me through the next 6 months of quote-unquote paychecks. I'm going to take that surplus and I'm going to do what I want with it, okay? So this is how they are able to manage that income and to be able to take care of themselves financially, but also be able to enjoy their hard work in managing purposefully that additional income coming in, okay? Or profit, I should say. See if there are any other questions. There are no other questions. So if you do come up with anything, if you do think about it after the fact and you do have a question, please feel free. Send me an email at melissa@thesavvylife.com. Otherwise, I want to remind you again, our next webinar in this series is Savvy Travel. So to give you an idea, you have, if you attended the last session, you know the 9 savvy money habits, right? So that's a big part of your financial foundation. Today, you've learned how to create a spending plan. That's something that you're going to do. In fact, I would give yourself a deadline. If you cannot put your spending plan together today, then do it by the end of the weekend. Without a deadline, it's too easy for time to go by, and all of a sudden it's this time next year, and you realize, oh, wow, what would have 2019 look like if I actually put that plan together and put it into play? So give yourself that deadline, okay? So these first two sessions have all been about the foundation. The next webinars in the series, the rest of the webinars in the series, we get to talk about the fun stuff, all right? So I'll see you we'll connect February 26th for Savvy Travel. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.